hypnotized. What's up is down, what's left is right. Chasing stars and holding you. I can't see the end, but we'll see it through.
Let's go live.
Great.
All set.
Excellent. Good evening. This is Dave Messina. We have Dan on, and Rob is going to be with us on audio. And
No Alex tonight? He's got
no, I
homework
know.
or something?
I think he might, but he might pop in. He's a Kanban just in time sort of guy. He showed up to a meeting we had today, and it was a couple minutes late, but it was great. And it was with the FAA. I'll touch on that a little later. We'll get to a couple of articles that Josh is busy with work, so he was kind enough to do a little research. And I had enough time to read the articles this time, so I'm not scanning them at the same time as everyone else right now.
That's good. I have not had a chance to read the articles. I'm all set to help present them, but I don't know what they are.
That's okay. I think we're in good shape. If we could start on the first one.
Sure.
The first one talks about a Nevada 2, and Rob may have some additional insight on this, but to me, the interesting thing with the Avata is, and we've had a couple of heated discussions on the level of compatibility with DJI. So we think that with a new Avata that does sound like it has some nice features, and improved CMOS sensor. Looks, it's still not lightning quick, but they have improved it a bit. And it is also, as Rob tells us, one of the drones of choice for public safety. So a good product. But yet we also hearing about yet another set of goggles. And this is where I get traumatized because, if you're trying to match and support all of the different DJI drones or FPV or O3, and then it looks like maybe an O4 sometime this year, or an Air Vista or an Air Unit, you have to have a couple different sets of goggles. Now I understand that their forward compatibility is pretty good, their backward compatibility is pretty good, but their forward compatibility not so much.
Yeah, it's been fairly decent, their backwards compatibility. I think they could do something better. I must be echoing my voice somehow. Not exactly sure how that is happening.
And so I've lived with ensuring backward and forward compatibility across product lines, and it's a ton of work. However, this is a big company, and DJI has brilliant engineers. So this is not this is by choice. This is not something they can't figure out. But good product in the Avata 2, and we expect it to be announced, as it says on the screen, April 11. And they're solid. Graphics are always great. They're good products, and we will mention a little later to see if my home state, one of the congressional representatives, will get her way and be able to ban DJI drones. We'll talk about that in a bit. Next up, Dan.
Yeah, the only thing I really had to add on that one, Dave, according to Ian, if any of you follow Madstech, he did a big video here a few weeks ago, and they're saying he's going to have a 60 and an 80 megahertz carrier channel, which is going to translate to 100 megabyte bit rate capability. He's going to have the bigger camera sensor, slightly bigger battery, which also means batteries aren't going to be cross compatible, which is kind of a disappointment in a little bit. But it's going to use OcuSync 4, and it's going to have 2 transmit and 2 receive antennas independent, where the current G2s have 2 dual purpose. So what that means, translated, far superior range, the capability for higher image quality, and a bigger camera sensor for low light. So that's stuff that we like in the realm that I work.
Thank you, Rob. And that's the bandwidth of this thing to me means that they're going to alter or combine channels. So if we look at this with an overlay to raceband, this will roll over additional channels. Correct. So this is not something you want to light up on a multi GP race. If I got that correct.
Yeah, and something else interesting, Dave, on the FCC side, on the FCC documentation, they're saying it's going to be 2.4 on the RC comms, 5.8 on the video as we expect, but it's also going to have a 5.1 option, which is we don't know what that means.
And in as much as we're seeing an FCC document right now, I assume that's an FCC Part 15, and that means that you do not need a ham radio license to run FPV with a Nevada. So props to DJI for getting that set of approvals for the Avata. On the original DJI FPV, it was approved on 3 of the I think 8 channels. So that's what they got. So good for them for doing the work. This is a fair amount of grunt work and testing and submissions. So good for them to get that done. It makes it easier. That meaning we can go out and fly, and you don't have to have your ham radio license in order to operate on those channels.
So, Rob, the important thing is, which one do you think will be faster when you guys are racing them? The Avata 1 or the Avata 2?
I would hope the Avata 2 is a little faster, but I don't know.
Could be that big heavy battery.
Yeah, it might very well be. So yeah, I'm kind of curious to see it come out. I've heard rumored prices, but we don't know obviously. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's one of the most affordable, the most efficacious, interior aircraft that's marketed for what we do. So.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. This is you use it a lot frequently, Rob, for interior, and it's great for that. And it's because of the shrouded props, it's safe. This is not an aerobatic freestyle drone, and so interesting to me that DJI has refined their target of their FPV product set. I mean, the Potato was sort of a rather fragile freestyle, and then the Avata was clearly something that was a bit more refined and really good inside.
The other thing I really hope is that they do a better job with naming things, so we don't have like DJI goggles and the FPV goggles and goggles 2 and goggles version 2. And is this going to be the goggles 2 version 2, or is this?
Well, they could really mess this up and call it the Avata .2.
Yeah. So anyway, hopefully somebody's thinking about those, because when you try to support people and people like in a chat say, "Should I get the DJI goggles 2?" I mean, the goggles version 2 or the goggles 2, or this is this next version or the previous version. Anyway, that's been a mess.
Well, and they're coming out with a new RC remote too, so the new RC controller. So I'm hoping it has more channels, because that's my biggest complaint. If you use the O3 as your RC and your video link, is there's just not a lot of channels on the DIY builds.
Yeah, I mean this sort of thing just makes me just crazy. When you think of the flexibility, and I get it. If we're looking at a DIY and a Radio Master with Edge TX and Express LRS, it's like, this is great. I got a lot of freedom. I know exactly where I'm transmitting and what's going on. But I get it. This is a closed system. Plug it in. Remote ID is integrated. It's standard remote ID. Everything's approved. It's done. So good. Like I said, solid product. The graphics are always amazing with DJI, and it doesn't help, or pardon me, it doesn't hurt when you own a Hasselblad. So the cameras are amazing. All right. Anything else on that, Rob? Thanks for jumping in. I wasn't sure if you were still available via audio, if you were jumping in a car to get home.
Yeah, that's all I got on that. So I'm excited. I think the release is next week. So I'm kind of excited to see the pricing and how it's going to lay out. So
yeah. Okay. This one we've got ODOT. And so Ohio Department of Transportation. So being somewhat of a political wonk, I'm reading these articles and I'm like, wow, these. So Ohio, particularly in the state government, is a rather red state, but they're they don't seem to mind, or they're not adopting a Floridian view. It looks like on drones, so good for them. So in Ohio, the Ohio Department of Transportation has gotten themselves a beyond visual line of sight waiver, and they have purchased a $40,000 Census Centario 20-pound uh, drone that it has it's an eVTOL with rotating nacelles, so it can take off vertically, and then the nacelles pivot, and you move into forward flight, much more efficient, and $40,000. The
So
Ohio folks are thrilled.
how can that cost $40,000? Is it
It's got a
paying
good
for the
service
R&D,
contract.
or yeah, like you get unlimited crashes with that?
Yeah, I was looking at it going, "Ooh, really? 40 grand? Okay."
And they just showed in the video a Far Sky remote. It looks like it's made out of styrofoam. It looks like Flight Test could build it for like $20.
Well, if not 20, not, I'd be delighted to sign that contract for 40,000. So yeah, don't know.
And it's got a good
And
camera in it. I'm sure that's a big
yeah,
chunk of it. But
yeah, and we know that this type of capability, either iNav or ArduPilot, are fantastic software platforms to run the drone. So, what are they spending money on in the development? Really not sure. But the use cases that the Ohio Department of Transportation has is search and rescue, inspection, and they go on and on about traffic management. So and traffic safety. So that's great. And this is so. They also had, which surprised me, it was 40. Yeah, Ohio Department of Transportation has 40 pilots. So a good sized. To me, this is a great article from a perspective of there are jobs coming up for just being a pilot. And I mean, by just, I mean, you're being a pilot full time. And that's cool. It's not something that's like, oh, well, I can get a little bit of flight time in, and then work it in on the side. So good for Ohio Department of Transportation. Now the next article was on the same thing, and it was largely the same, and it mentioned that they're using CAL analytics, and other than that, was a restatement. A lot of the same detail. They did talk about that the aircraft has a wingspan of 7.5 feet. That you got an impression of that on the video. So good product, and good for Ohio.
what is CAL Analytics?
I believe it's the map. I think it sounded, if I understood it right, it sounded like an Esri type. So the combination of data analytics with a map. That's if I got that right. I could be mistaken, but that's what my impression was as I was reading it. So line up a relational database with a map and be able to query the geography and then have the data behind it. That was the impression I got. I welcome any corrections on that.
So Ohio's going to have so many drones doing traffic management that they need a traffic management system for the drones. Is that right?
Yeah, they did. Well, they did talk about UTM, and so the author in the article got a little down, went down the road, and he or she made a number of mistakes about what UTM is and what it's going to do. And so unmanned traffic management system is still being worked on. The FAA has they hired Administrator Whitaker from Archer, so there is a huge focus within the FAA on advanced air mobility, so air taxis, um, fully autonomous, as well as things like cargo and shipping. So that's where the unmanned traffic management system So if there is no pilot, then the idea is that that's an aircraft that would be managed by a UTM, and a UTM is a federation of independent air traffic control companies that have to interoperate and somehow have to do this in a secure nature. So, lot to be filled in. It was probably 2 years ago that we saw the last ConOps. What's Alex is talking to me? Okay, yeah, Alex gets a pass. He's doing homework.
I thought he did his homework during the meetings.
Really, I think he does. So
Must be some serious homework.
We tease Alex a lot about he's a senior in engineering school, and he's crushing it, and we are of course tremendously proud of him, and he's working on a couple of very cool projects right now that we'll get him to share with this group. As I said, don't take the if you're interested in unmanned traffic management, do a search on ConOps, CONOPS, V2.0, and it's a NASA document. And if you scan the summary in the first couple pages, you'll get the gist of what NASA and the FAA are trying to put together. And it's largely subcontracting the entire traffic management for unmanned vehicles to private industry. So this is why the likes of Airbus and Verizon and airframe manufacturers, as well as telephony companies, are interested in this work, because a lot of it will necessitate telecommunication hardware and software, and RF transmission and reception. So more than we ever needed to know about Ohio Department of Transportation and their desire to use UTM whenever it comes to be. Next article is about the USA is banning Chinese drones. I thought this article was reasonably well written. The author talked about how DJI has 90% of hobby drones, 70% of industry, and greater than 80% of first responder drones. And they talked about the AUVSI controversy, where AUVSI said that they were supportive, and then when an email was obtained from using the Utah analog to a FOIA, they were able to determine that AUVSI was on the other side of the issue.
So publicly, they were showing we're very much this way. Privately, they're telling everybody the exact opposite.
Right. So the AUVSI spokesperson said that they were really, they're not having to retract anything, because they split the definition of procurement and usage. And so my head hit the desk. So this was like registration and pilot operations. It's like, oh, so
it sounds like remote ID and production and operator.
Exactly. So what is significant is that there is this article talked about. Interestingly, they did not talk about the specific bill numbers or get into it too much, but they did talk about Congressional Representative Elise Stefanik. She's a representative from Northern New York. She is a Republican, and so that's a little unusual in New York. She's also the number 3 ranking representative in the House, which is extraordinarily important. That's a powerful position. And so consequently, when you look this bill, HR 2864, up in something like GovTrack, they give it 33% chance of passing. So this bill, it also appears to have changed. And so it is now explicitly targeting DJI. In prior versions, they targeted all transmission, and it was targeted to the FCC. I need to do a little more research, and hopefully that prior version of the text is now gone, because the prior version would have grounded all radio control model airplanes, all drones, full stop. So now the wording in the HR 2864 is that uh, Ms. Stefanik, or pardon me, Congresswoman Stefanik, more appropriate, um, chooses to identify all DJI drones explicitly and ban them in the United States. So this is not procurement for the federal government. This is an effort to ban DJI. Period.
Very
So
specifically.
yeah, and so it's this type of targeting, it to me is not sensible. It's also not prudent. We've talked to Rob about this at length, and people will die because of this. We don't have a good alternative. There is not a replacement for the hundreds, if not millions, of dollars that have already been spent on DJI drones in for businesses and importantly for public safety. So this is there, and also we have to applaud our colleague Greg Revendu of Pilot Institute. Put out a video. I encourage folks to send in a note to their own congressional representative. And so I don't think this bill is yet on the floor. I think it's still in committee, and we'll see what happens from here. But if I have to, so if it's still, if it's not passed yet, and if it has a 33% chance of passing, it's obviously not gotten to the floor. So please take a look at the. It was a post that I put up a couple weeks ago on our FPVFC Facebook page, and it has a link over to Pilot Institute where you can still send a canned email up to your congressional representative. It figures out who your rep is and add some comments. And as always, please be professional, polite, and productive.
So if this is specifically trying to target DJI, how do they do that in the bill, and what prevents DJI from creating another company or selling to the United States in another way, sneaky way?
They characterized it as any entity thereof or derivative of the DJI, and so it's they could resell components and put together a shell, physical shell, and have it sold in another through another entity. That's they could work around that, but it's and to me again, this is the silliness of targeting an individual company. I mean, it's not a good way to
Government
legislate.
shouldn't be targeting a company like that.
Yeah, company or countries. It's a bad approach. If you have something that you want to legislate against, then it should be a higher abstraction but a specific company. And as I said, this was a well-written article, and the author did their research, and they and others have come up with nothing to back up the fear mongering of, well, the data is being sent over to China. And as we know from working with DJI rewrote their entire onboard software and made it self-contained, and they were selling that to the U.S. federal agencies until the U.S. agencies were banned from purchasing DJI. So,
and I think I just pasted in the chat the link that you posted to Pilot Institute's video about remote ID enforcement, is what it sounds like. But
yes,
maybe it covers more topics than just that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. Greg does a good job in that video as well, in terms of basically reiterating the point of we can't tell you, or we can't dictate for you your decision do you want to comply with remote ID or not. But Greg makes a good point, and it's our view as well, that it's just as easy to just comply, and then particularly if you have a 107 certificate, or if you have a Part 66 or other license, that can be pulled if you have a serious infraction with recreational exception. So it's our obviously that's our take, is that we would recommend to comply, but we can't. We're not going to pound on the desk about it.
And
It's
they're
your
not just saying
choice.
we want to ban DJI Mavics. They're like banning anything DJI makes. So it would be
Anything.
our air units. It'd be the Avata 2. It would be the new goggles, or maybe not the goggles, but the the new air unit if there is one. I don't know. I guess the goggles broadcast, and if they're blocking the FCC airwaves, like the goggles could be against the regulation.
Yeah,
as
this
well.
was all this one. The write up that I was reading, it's all DJI product, and it happily had they had stopped the FCC, although they were trying to. The ban is through Commerce, not any of the not the aviation subcommittees. They're still going through the same subcommittee that they were, but now they've taken out the FCC part of it. Go figure.
And I was just going to mention this, but XJet also brought it up in the chat. DJI makes things like this Rode wireless microphone. They have a DJI version of that. That broadcasts over the wireless. They've got cameras that have Bluetooth. Like that, all of that potentially would be blocked by this, which I'm sure the people thinking about it aren't really thinking of all of those consequences.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, on that, I'll leave company names out, but my biggest concern on it is the only alternative that we have for interior operations. A recent quote for another agency was in the likes for 2 interior and 2 exterior aircraft. It's a subscription-based model, and they were quoted $600,000 for 3 years. So to replace our fleet, that would cost us $4 million a year just in the equipment. That's not feasible, and it's not, the taxpayers can't support it, nor can we. So, that's why, we're very concerned about this. And, we want to have the best tools and the most capable equipment in our hands to take care of people, and we don't want to lose it.
Yeah. When I hear prices like that, that's gouging. So now with my job at Flight Test, I'm getting a much closer view of printed circuit board, flight controller, ESC, motor prices, and wow, that's ridiculous. So
yeah, so I welcome innovation. I love innovation, and I want to see the industry grow, but we got to get the market. People got to get the market through innovation and not legislation.
So thank you, Rob. I wanted to wrap up with about a month ago. I sent a couple of memos off to the FAA for some reason that maybe it was because I asked too many questions, or maybe it was that I annoyed someone, but it seemed like I was just being ghosted by the FAA. So I as my son said, well, you're an old white guy, so did you send a strongly worded memo? So I wrote a strongly worded memo, and I got an answer back, and I got a call from a gentleman who is now the manager responsible for all of the FRIA processing and much more. So the FRIA work is a small percentage of his job, and he's responsible for much of the west part of the United States in FAA policies and practices and such. And so he asked to get together with a couple of us from FPVFC, and also he brought in the team lead from the remote ID rulemaking team. And so it's neither of these gentlemen are part of the UAS integration office, so they're both serious practitioners and definitely where the work gets done. And so I was not expecting a kind reception, and I was not expecting much of a productive call, and it was just fantastic. So I'm grateful to the FAA for responding and to reach out and to set up a call with us. And so this covered both Flight Test Community Association as well as FPVFC. So the first thing we talked about was in the FRIA process. And if you're not working with any of us on a FRIA application, it could be a who cares. But for us, this was a dramatic improvement, and they've added a request for information capability in the application process. So in the first 7 or 8 months, it was either deny or approve.
Yeah,
And
you'd send in your application, cross your fingers, and all of a sudden you just get an email back. Nope. Even
nope.
if the person reviewing your application was like, well, I'm going to have to reject this because I don't know the answer to this, this, or this, they would just reject it. And they had no ability to contact, well, they should have, but they had no
Yeah,
process,
they didn't.
no
They did.
policy
Yeah.
to how to
Right.
contact the requester.
And it was so in the early days of Part 107 waivers, it was a similar thing of whack-a-mole. The FAA did not provide tips and techniques. They did not provide guidance that you had to guess, and like, okay, maybe the right answer is this and maybe it's that. So we now have an infinitely better process. So you make a dumb mistake, you heavy thumb the keyboard and make an error on the application. Comes right back, hey, think you made a mistake on the application instead of denied.
Yeah, that
And
was so
so
silly when I had one denied. It's like, oh, okay, I want to resubmit this with or change a couple of words. It's like, nope, start over, make a whole
got
new
to start over,
request.
right? So props to the FAA for that one. The interesting one is so the individual from the rulemaking committee. So he's talking to three of us in FPVFC, and he says, "Well, I don't know how many of you read the entire remote ID rule document of some 500 pages." And I kept my mouth shut, but I'm thinking, well, all three of us, we really have. And he said, you might know that we committed in the preamble to provide a remote ID authorization for a temporary event. And I was like, yeah, we're very aware of that. We, of course, had been pestering the FAA since 2018 for that, and it went right up and through the rules because I mean, Alex is governmental affairs director for Multi GP, and so what do we do for a Multi GP race? There wasn't a good answer. Well, now there is. So it's a little early days, and it's like, okay, okay, this is the process. And so we, as a CBO, we send an email into the RID authorization email ID, and we start a dialogue and start a process and try to get the approval made. One of the examples that I did not know about is that all AMA events have remote ID authorization in the US, full stop. And so that's a positive from the perspective of those are, they get stood up and taken down. This is not a FRIA. This is not a permanent site. Maybe it's an air show with models. Maybe it's a charity event. Maybe it's a fundraiser, whatever. So now if there's a contest director, they can set it up and they get remote ID waived. The important thing, and the two gentlemen we were talking to were a bit frustrated on this, as they said, largely from schools that they work with to provide free approval. Is that there is a feeling that, oh, once you get a free, well, then I don't have to pay attention to any FAA rules, and that's something that we try to reiterate. And I would assert that most of the FPVFC members understand that if you're in a FRIA or if you get a waiver of remote ID, that's all. You still must comply with all of the other um, rules and regulations of the FAA for small UAS. And one of the ones that we are keen to repeat is if you're flying recreationally and you have a sub 250 aircraft, do not register it. And this was a recommendation from Kevin Morris of the FAA. So if you register your sub 250 and you're going to UAS and you're going to fly it recreationally, you do not have to have remote ID on it. But if you register it, you do, because it's, and this is one of the check marks is well, is it registered or not? If it's registered, you have to have remote ID on the aircraft. So that was one. The other is we asked, and we had a hunch that we knew the answer, and we were right. And so we asked about what's the renewal process. So a FRIA is good for 4 years. How do folks renew it? So the process is not baked. That's fine. And the anticipation
Well, they've
is
got
that
3 years.
got 3 years. So the comment was it's likely to be made public in 2025. Fine. So
The process to renew
mhm,
will be made public in 2025?
mhm.
Okay.
And that, yeah, to me that's fine. Another one, and this is more for us. The coordinates for the boundary definition of FRIAs can take an hour, and it's because you have to submit the coordinates in 5 decimal places, and they have to be in a sequential clockwise parameter or pattern rather, and you have to key that in coordinate by coordinate. It's not there's no API. Um, so Alex said, are you going to open this up and like add a map? He said, I see you've got a map there. So as soon as you key in the coordinates, it comes up on the map, and that's great. And we really appreciate that. It'd be so nice if I could just go in with my mouse and go click, 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 and there's the FRIA. And their answer was, yeah, we're working on that and we'll have it released. Now,
Wow.
they said September, and I was not a wise ass. I kept my mouth shut.
Didn't ask what year.
I didn't ask what year, but they said, September 2024. So if it goes late, we get it. It's great that they're enhancing this, and it's more than just for the CVOs. Any educational institution can send a free application themselves, and that will help everyone with that ability as well. In addition, we have been whining about, we can see an API, an application programming interface right there. So it would be a lot easier for us. It'd be fewer errors in transcription. So could we please have access to the API? So about a year ago, I was told flat no, and these gentlemen are looking into that for us. So they may tell us no again, and we've been completely upfront about that. We've asked, and we were told no, and here's the individual who told us no, and she was of some significant authority. So we'll see what happens, but very encouraged with a dialogue and a great discussion and changes and improvements to the FRIA process. It was hard. I don't think I would have said that a year ago, that to be that optimistic about a positive call about a FRIA process, but it was a great call, and I'm very appreciative. We are working on different topic. The Drone Advisory Council we're working on a second tasking. This one has to do with standard remote ID. And so that if you purchase a ready-to-fly quadcopter from any one of the leading retailers, be it Get FPV, Rotor Riot, Race Day Quad, Pyro Drone, whomever, that and it's going to be if it's intended for use in recreational use, but it's going to be produced in quantity, it has to have standard remote ID. And so not I don't know of any of the recreational providers who are doing that. But in addition, if you're a smaller manufacturer, say you're building a $50,000 drone or a $40,000 drone with cameras for the Ohio Department of Transportation, that has to be have standard remote ID in it. Difference between standard and broadcast module is that the standard remote ID has to be able to, if there is a failure in the power on self test of the remote ID system, it has to be able to intercept the command and control or the ability of the aircraft not to fly. In addition, instead of a static location of the ground control station or the controller or transmitter, it's a dynamic. So it's updated once a second.
I wonder how
So
that
those
Ohio drone is doing that when they were showing a FrSky radio controller as the controller flying it, unless that was unrelated video.
I don't think. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think I saw that and was like, Oh, that's going to be trouble.
Maybe they've got a secondary telemetry link between the two or something.
So, oh, yeah, like he's got a backpack with another device.
That's why it costs $40,000. $20,000 of it is just the standard remote ID feature.
Right. So we're putting together a document, and we're going around to various folks that we know. We've got about 40 companies across the United States, interviewing these individuals, and then the results of the survey and interviews will be anonymous. Because we're not going to go to the FAA and say, "Oh yeah, there's this company says yeah they're making 100 a week and these drones, and yeah none of them have standard remote ID." Yeah, we're not going to do that, but we'll provide the facts, and then we will make some recommendations and take that to um, uh, the UAS integration office, and then potentially Congress as well. This has absolute applicability to recreational for the reasons I just stated, but also worth looking ahead to beyond visual line of sight. The beyond visual line of sight rulemaking committee is busy. Um, and so they're working on that, and there is existence of a part 108, and so I'm hoping that we'll be able to if not in the initial rule, to be able to carve out what is broadcast only for recreational. And so as network remote ID becomes ever present, then hopefully we can get away from that and continue to have recreational devices flying in the air. So a little bit of a little more positive than some of the dark news that we hear Monday through Friday.
Yeah, Bagzilla brings up an interesting point. Like if you're doing a flight, say you're in an emergency flight to go rescue someone or something, and your remote ID fails, and obviously you purchase this drone, so it's got standard remote ID, and it won't take off if remote ID fails. You're stuck. Like you can't fly it because your standard
Right.
remote ID failed, even if
Right.
that's the only thing broken.
On takeoff, you're absolutely right. It will not take off. In flight, what's important is it does not shut down the command and control. It doesn't crash the drone. But you're absolutely right. If you're in an emergency situation and your standard remote ID fails, the drone will not take off. And Rob has been suffering this one, which is you can't the standard remote ID system cannot be turned off. Well, what if you're in a covert operation and you'd really rather not transmit your location and your ground control station, because that would be dangerous to the officer.
Well, it's dangerous. It's potentially dangerous to all operators, but especially so in those circumstances.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're not making much progress on the general case of that the GCS is dynamic and accessible to the public, but that's an issue. And Rob, I hear you coming off mute. If you wanted to speak up on that topic.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting conundrum because you can get a Part 89 waiver. So I actually have a Part 89 waiver where we can operate RIT off, but the problem is that the manufacturers aren't allowed to allow us to turn it off.
Right.
So even though we can legally operate with it off, we physically don't have the capability unless we physically disassemble and take out the GPS device, which we're not going to do.
Right. So this is, to me, growing pains in this rule process, and I'm hopeful that we'll a rule change is very unlikely, but we'll see something that will allow for this to function, and there should be some type of emergency override it, in my humble opinion. Anything else around the room,
There
gentlemen?
was another question earlier from Meat. He was asking if any of the special privileges that the AMA have ever gotten in the past, have they trickled down to anybody else?
Yeah, usually the answer to that is no. So what we're doing is we're following up, and so the three other CBOs do a pretty good job of sharing information. And as you can imagine, with my position in flight test now, we have for the last 2 years have had a close and excellent relationship between FTCA and FPVFC. So whatever we would figure out, we would share. That's not the way it works with the AMA. We work with the AMA. We applaud some of their successes. But this one with the authorization is a big deal. Other authorizations and exceptions that they've got are high altitude flight for turbine and sailplane model aircraft. Also not shared, or not, how they did it, how they, what were the, what did they have to do to write up. We think that the event authorization necessitated a contest director. And so in the AMA, it's if you are a contest director, you have to go through quite a bit of reading and studying and being approved as a contest director by headquarters. So that would be a good stipulation. But so we're going to go through the process ourselves. But so the benefit that we have is that someone else has gone through the process. Unfortunately, it does look like there will be a bit of whack-a-mole. Hopefully not, if we have a good dialogue with the individuals responding to the authorizations. We hope that it creates a request for information dialogue like we have in the FRIAs. As always, Meet, good question.
Yeah, you'd think if the AMA could have any of their events automatically become a FRIA or event FRIA, why couldn't any other CBO do the same thing?
Right. Like, like we would like to do that for the multi-GP chapters that are not affiliated with the AMA. Not all chapters are special interest groups of the AMA. So that would be a perfect one to go for. Because as most folks know, a lot of races are held at the same location most of the time, but a multi GP chapter could, they'll set up at a different location for fun, and so that's the thought process behind this capability. Is it's a temporary event. It's not a permanent flying location like a FRIA is designed for. So it is the alternate process that the FAA committed to in the remote ID rule back in January 2021.
Yeah, so Meet's following that up with saying that there's clearly a class divide in the terms of how the different groups are treated. So how the different CBOs are being treated in some ways by the FAA.
Yeah, we've made the point that the AMA represents approximately 5% of the population of hobbyists in the United States, aviation hobbyists, and the other three CBOs represent 95%. So STEM plus C represents Arizona largely, and mostly school related. And so the other 90 some odd percent are represented by FPVFC and FTCA. So yeah, I think that that's an issue, and it's one we bring up pretty regularly. But so I'm delighted that we've got a voice. We've got someone we can talk to if we need a path of escalation, and we've got someone who obviously is listening to us. Anything else from you, Dan? Any questions?
Let's see. There's a bit of chat going on. We've got a lot of people watching the video tonight. But I don't think there were any really special, any unanswered questions or things we haven't answered before.
Great.
But yeah, I've got nothing new on my end.
All right.
All quiet here as far as flying drones. I do have some new remote ID modules that I need to get a closer look at now that they've been delivered to me, but I haven't taken them out of the box and dug into what they are yet.
Great. And to remind folks, what we're doing is Dan has been kind enough to evaluate to the level we can. This is not lab evaluation, but we're looking at remote ID broadcast modules that we think are appropriate for recreational use with, say, a 5-inch quad, or obviously larger. And that means that they're in the 10 to 15 gram mass, and they're around, nominally somewhere near or below $100. So they're not a 24 karat $500 unit or a $300 unit. We think that the job can be done for a lower price point, and so we're Dan is evaluating them and putting up those write-ups on our website. And in addition, I'm separating myself from this due to my job with Flight Test and the Flight Test Easy ID. So we're working to try to avoid a conflict of interest there. And I will not edit Dan's copy.
Unless we've got anything else, we can end on a relevant and interesting and more fun question from XJet asking about, can you fly a drone during a solar eclipse, or is that the same as night flying? And first of all, I'm going to say I'm going to travel to someplace to be in the totality of this solar eclipse next week. I will probably have a drone with me. If I'm flying recreationally, you can fly at night without lights as long as you can still keep it in line of sight, right? If I remember the rules right.
Thanks to the FPVFC safety guidelines. The other CBOs instituted that you have to have a strobe. So you can do it, but if someone asks you, what safety guidelines are you using, and you're flying and you can see it and there's no strobe, FPVFC is the answer. So I like that. Thank you, XJet.
Good question. And I think that's all I've got for tonight.
All right, Rob, anything else?
I just learned yesterday that the CAP system's going away. So all Part 91 processing for COAs or anything like that, if anybody flies or operates under that, it's not just public safety that uses those, but we are a heavy consumer. It's going to all migrate into Drone Zone. So that's a great news. Drone Zone's a lot better interface.
Good. I'm glad they're replacing it with something and not just removing it for a period of time. That's great.
Yes, sir. That's all I got.
Okay. All right. With that, Josh will be back in 2 weeks, we hope. Certainly does a better job at this than me, and I appreciate everyone showing up, and thanks especially for the support, as well as thanks for the great questions during tonight's session. Take care. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll see you guys in a couple weeks. Bye.
Fly so high I'm hypnotized. What's up is down, what's left is right. Chasing stars and holding you.